Those who serve are often asked to do dangerous things. That is why they are looked up to as heroes. But who do the heroes look up to? Ask any service member who has ever needed a corpsman or a medic, and they will tell you. Tonight, we will be talking with those life-saving heroes. Stay with us as we respond to the call, Corpsman Up. First Sergeant Kevin D. Barker enlisted in the Army on June 16, 1998. He served in every enlisted position in a career that spanned 5 duty stations and 7 combat tours. He earned the rank of First Sergeant and served as a Battalion Command Sergeant Major for the 101st Airborne Air Assault Division. His tours included Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Syria, Kuwait, Kosovo, and 8 years in Germany. He has flown both the Sergeant Major of the Army and Chief of Staff of the Army in his aircraft. He was proud to take pictures with Chuck Norris while deployed in Fallujah, where he was awarded a Marine Combat Patch and the Naval Unit Citation. We honor his service. Thanks for tuning in to Veterans Voices. I'm your host, Nathan Johnson. Tonight's show will concentrate on the service and experiences of corpsmen, medics, and doctors. If you want to be part of the conversation, call us right now, 925-313-1170. Send us a message through Facebook at Veterans Voices 1 or email us veteransvoices@ContraCostaTV.org. I want to introduce you to our great panel of guests tonight. First, we have Guy Lamunyon, who is the Veterans Service Commander for the National Association of Military Medics and Corpsmen. And we are also joined by veteran corpsmen and medics, Crystal Kane, Kelly Kitzman, Mike Weber, and Kristin Cassidy. Welcome, docs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, let's do some quick introductions just so our audience becomes familiar with who's on the show. We've got part of our own production team. Crystal, introduce yourself, please.
Hi, my name is Crystal. I was a Navy corpsman. I served from 2014 to 2019. I spent most of my time in the Naval Hospital at Camp Lejeune in North Carolina, and then also at the Brig on base. And I'm now living in the Bay Area in California, where I'm finishing out my undergraduate in psychology.
Thanks, Crystal. And we've got Mike Weber. Mike, introduce yourself.
I'm Mike Weber, and I grew up near Seattle, Washington. Got drafted into the Army, served in 1967, 1968, served in Vietnam with the 1st Medical Company in the Pleiku region, primarily supporting MASH units in an ambulance company.
Thanks, Mike. And you've been on the show before. Welcome back. And
Thank
another
you.
Returning guest, Kristin Cassidy. Doc, introduce yourself.
I am Kristin Cassidy. I served in the United States Navy from 2000 to 2005. I did 2 tours in Iraq with the Marines, and I'm a California true and I'm never leaving.
I'm with you on that. All right, and we have 2 new guests, never been on the show before. We have, of course, Guy, as we introduced before. Introduce yourself, Guy.
Thanks. Actually, I had 2 careers. I had an enlisted career where I served as a combat medic with the famed 101st Airborne Division in Vietnam, in the jungle, in the rice paddies from Da Nang to the DMZ. And then later, I completed nursing school, and I had a commissioned career as an Army nurse and a nurse specialist in mental health. So I made E5 and I made O5.
Well, thank you so much, Guy. And I really honor, I think I was reading your bio, over 40 years in military service. Very incredible. So last but not least, Kelly, join us from Wisconsin. Introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you. My name's Keely. I was with the 2 Marines serving as an FMF corpsman for 3 years, 2 deployments to Iraq. And then I finished my last year with base DOD in 29 Palms. So I'm a desert rat at its finest. So happy to be here.
Well, thank you all for joining us tonight. And now's one of my favorite times of the show where I get to shut up and listen to all of you talk. But let me get us started here. What is the job of a corpsman? What is the job of a medic? Some of the conversations and questions coming from some of our audience are, do medics carry weapons? Are they considered combatants? They're with infantry units at times. What does a medic or a corpsman do on a daily basis? Crystal, maybe you could give us a synopsis.
Well, in my role, it was very traditionally clinical. So I definitely did not have a weapon in the hospital. We had to take a few from a few of the patients, but I didn't carry one on me. And then aside from my time, I spent most of my time in the ER or on wards. So very like classic patient care, bedside care. And then I was also working independently at the brig. So that was a lot of responding to fights and a lot of informal mental health treatment.
Which is interesting because with Crystal, so Crystal's the blue side, as we refer to it, and then I was the green side, where, like you asked about the weapons. I mean, we were basically treated just like any Marine in the infantry. And most of my Marines, again, if I wasn't facing them, they were looking at me from the back. They just assumed I was a Marine with a really bad haircut. So I was, rocking around with an M4, and we never got M9s because 2.7 had no budget. But, we were basically expected to do the same thing. And for us, ours was completely field med based. We were trained in clinical stuff. So on deployment, we were working with people like Kristen who were doing the surge tent, the BAS. Most of the time I was used to handing them off to them or to people like Crystal. So we were expected to be a combatant, but not a combatant. So yeah, it's an interesting kind of shift, especially from the old time of being the classic non-combatant type style that Mike and Guy are probably more used to.
And Keely, I was a perfect 50-50 of Crystal and you, where I spent 2 years at Naval Medical Center Balboa, got some really good IV skills there working on cancer patients. And then the other 3 years I was out in the field with the Marines. So, we can do both things at the same time.
Love that.
So a lot of our audience is familiar with, the ambulance rushing down the road, lights and sirens. But what I'm hearing is corpsmen are not necessarily in the back waiting for that 911 call. At times you're right there on the front lines, serving alongside other soldiers, other Marines. And Mike and Guy, I know that your service spans over some of the past. Has this role always been the same, or has the role of a corpsman or medic changed over the decades?
Well, I think we demonstrated that there are various roles for military medical personnel, depending upon your assignment. Now, if I can just talk 1 second about the weapon, in World War II, we had the Geneva Convention. And in the Geneva Convention and in that style war, after a battle, the battle would stop and the medics were permitted to go on the battlefield without, potential injury to bring back the wounded. But we have not had an enemy that followed Geneva Convention since. So that's the transition from the Geneva Convention protected medic or corpsman to what's now the concept of soldier medic, 2 minutes in one. So I don't know, what was the rest of your question?
Well, just how that has changed, if at all, over the decades. And you really pointed out how really more the rules of the battlefield. But I'm curious, though, how do corpsmen or medics work to integrate them into units, being that they have a different role of being that care provider, that lifesaver?
I think just like Keely said, we were treated just the same, basically, if not a little bit better because they knew who held the meds. But to your statement about the front line and, this was a unique war where there really was no front line. The front line was wherever you were receiving fire. So I think that is a huge role change as far as, clearing the battlefield, letting the corpsmen out. there was none of that. Our enemy could look like your niece. I mean, so there was no like safe area to keep the corpsman until it was time to work. So I think that's a huge change.
Well, in my time in Vietnam, I carried a weapon whenever I was outside the wire, and all geared up and, flak jacket and all that jazz. And my unit served as paramedic for our region. So if there's something going on kind of anywhere, a lot of units, like an engineering unit, would not have medics, and we'd answer up to an industrial accident. Somebody gets run over by a truck or whatever. So we were always out running around, kind of by ourselves in our truck with a Red Cross on it, and picking people up and bringing them in. In addition to our dust-off helicopters picking people up. But if they were local and accessible by truck, we went and got them. And in that capacity, we were a soldier. We packed our rifle and wore a flak jacket, helmet, and all that routine. So I worked a lot at MASH units, but I never and whatnot. And most of the time, we got another helicopter coming, so it's right back out. So
we just had a little bit of a technical glitch, but I just want to invite you just to pick up, continue from that in regards to. It sounds like there's a differentiation in terms of the role at times, but the identity for you, Mike, is that you were just another soldier doing your job. As just another soldier doing your job, though. Give our audience a little bit of an understanding of some of the unique training that you had to undergo to prepare you for this, beyond just keeping a rifle clean and knowing how to shoot.
Well, I'll tell you that one lack of training that interfered with our performance was, again, I was in an ambulance company, and we had 50 truck ambulances, and as I say, 5 helicopters, and an awful lot of medics didn't know how to drive, especially in the mud, and it's monsoon season, it's raining like hell, and, we had a lot of incidents where driving was a challenge for the best of drivers. And I often thought that medics going to Vietnam should have been trained in truck driving and, how to keep it on the road. That just didn't happen very well.
Yeah, and I'm going to keep piggyback off that too with that question, especially because we have the huge differentiation with like West Coast, East Coast Marines, and we had a thing on the West Coast with combat trauma management. So we were sent after we already did our field med school, which was additional to the 4 months that we did of corpsman school. So we're already supposed to show up ready to do it, and in that role, both soldier or Marine and corpsman. But then we were sent to an additional live tissue training where we're doing, dealing with pigs and actually, the closest we can to true combat casualties just for training. But then at the same time, we're being treated just like the Marines, where we're expected to, engage, going on patrols, understanding the movement to contact. And so a lot of it though, and a lot of my boys will back up on that, is a lot of the training we had was on the job. If you didn't know how to do XYZ, and it happened right in front of you, you're going to learn right now if you're lucky to have a senior with you, or you're going to try to just use whatever small amount that we would touch on it in a class or in training, and you had to do it that way. So like I said, my Marines took me aside because I lucked out with some great guys, and they were like, all right, Doc, we're going to show you how to do, like if we're doing close combat, training, close combat combat, then it's going to be there. Close quarter stuff is not something we're used to. So we got taught, on the fly if we had any time off. So it was definitely a constant. I feel like corpsmen especially have a constant learning curve, and medics alone. We're expected to do both that medical training and stay on top of it with the latest and greatest, where at the same time to be, be lethal enough to protect ourselves.
When we come back, we will continue our conversation. Right now, let's hear from our vet on the street, Stephen Burchick, as he asks veterans about their experiences with corpsmen and medics.
I'm Steve Burchick, and our segment today is Vet on the Street. In the background, you can see the 4th of July parade here in Danville. Our question is, when you were in the service, were you ever assisted by a medic or a corpsman?
My name is John Trujillo. I served in Vietnam in 1967-68. On August 5th, 1967, I was medevaced to Cameron Bay with first and second degree burns from JP4, from an LZ in the Central Highlands. I was treated extremely well. The medics were quick into getting aid to me and getting a helicopter to evacuate me to the hospital.
Yeah, I was personally not involved with any corpsmen in the military service other than at the hospital, but my uncle, Joey Ott, was a corpsman, petty officer 2nd class in the Navy, and he was attached to the Marines, and he participated in the invasion at Iwo Jima during World War II. Yes, my uncle, he made it back. He's from Philadelphia. I'm from Philadelphia, and he survived, and no injuries or wounds, and he lived a long life in the city.
I was wounded twice in Vietnam. I was at the 198th Light Infantry. Our medic was Lonnie Hines, and the same medic treated me both times, and I was medevaced out both times.
I was out in the Quezon Valley, 1967, November the 7th, and I had a bunch of guys wounded out there, and the medics came to our rescue. One helicopter pilot that I really will never forget, Pat Brady, who flew the medevac. One of my troopers was asking me, he said, "Sir, do you think I'm going to make it out of here?" I said, "You're damn right you are. You see that, hear that whop, whop, whop?" I said, "That's the medics coming that's the angels from heaven. They're coming to get you out of here. You're going to make it, buddy. Don't worry about it."
Mike Weber, U.S. Army medic, Pleiku, Vietnam, 67, 68. Memorable event was a chopper came in with wounded guys, one of which was laying on his stomach on the litter because his feet were amputated. His feet were all tangled up and torn up. We pulled him out of the helicopter and headed for the emergency room with him on the litter. And the young man, he saw where we were heading into this Quonset hut where the doctors were, and he said, "Hold it, guys, hold up, hold up, hold up." He says, "Just a minute." He says, they're not going to let me smoke in there, are they?" And I said, "No, sir, they're not. They're not going to let you smoke in that hospital." And he says, "Well, hold up then. I want to have a smoke before we go in." And this is a man whose feet, both feet, were detached from his body. So I guess that's a testimony for morphine because he wasn't feeling a thing.
Tonight we're talking with corpsmen and medics. Do you want to be part of our conversation? Call us at 925-313-1170. Send us a message through Facebook at Veterans Voices 1 or email us veteransvoices@ContraCostaTV.org. In fact, I heard the phone ring just a few minutes ago, so thank you for watching and thanks for checking in with your questions and your comments. This is a fantastic conversation tonight with some of our very unique and special corpsmen and medics. The last segment ended with one of our panelists, Mike Weber, talking about a very intimate and even traumatic experience that he endured while in Vietnam. And I want to shift this conversation more towards what our corpsmen and medics really endure when they save the lives of our service members. Guy, I want to start with you because I think if you could help us understand a little bit maybe of your perspective of how medics and corpsmen treat physical wounds, but how maybe more psychological or moral injury wounds develop as a result.
So I'm reminded of an incident that happened where I had multiple casualties, and at the end of the situation, I went back to my bunker, and actually I was crying. And I don't know why. I'm feeling sorry for myself, I guess, for the pain that I witnessed. But since that time, one of the things that I've devoted time to, both in my career at the Veterans Administration and after my retirement is the special problems that medics and corpsmen carry. For instance, in moral injury, which is the new concept for survivor guilt, it's said that the infantry soldiers grieve violating one of our 10 commandments, thou shalt not kill. But we're not killers, we're healers.
All right, and then I'll just...
And so our particular issue is grieving for the people that we could not save. People that we would have liked to have, but there were just two, like the story about the man with both legs gone. Who would have that corpsman that saved his life?
Well, Guy, I think that's an important part of the piece of the puzzle. Sorry about that. But you know, that happened to me. I had some intense interactions and somebody thought I needed some R&R. So they sent me away from my unit for a little bit. And on a morning briefing while I was on R&R, I found out that my staff sergeant team lead had, we were with EOD, had been blown up. And, you know, I think it's only normal to wonder if I hadn't been sent away on R&R, if I had been with that Marine and we had gone through all the safety checks that we normally had gone through, maybe that wouldn't have happened. And so I think the reflective part of what I could have done if I was there is it can stay with you and kind of haunt you a little bit.
Yeah, I would I think a lot of us too have similar stories. I think one thing too, with just a big aspect that I've always noticed is always like the small things, like, you know, the mental toll that we take with casualties and, you know, obviously like saving them is our, you know, that's our main goal. But there's a lot of times where we know they're not going to be saved. And I think it's that ability to cross that threshold of just understanding that this person's not going to make it no matter what we could do. And I was very fortunate to have more veteran corpsmen as well as docs with me that were able to kind of help that transition so that my first experiences with death weren't as traumatizing. You know, and I think one of them even just offered me a cigarette, and all my Marines who are watching or whatever know that I don't smoke or anytime at that point. And he offered me a cigarette. He's like, this will help. So it's, you know, just little stuff like that. I think we don't realize what we're going into until it happens.
Maybe not a part of your training.
Did you have other Marine, or did you have other corpsmen with you, or were you like?
Yeah,
I don't remember anybody being around to offer me anything.
Yeah, well, it was my Marines, so it was.
Yeah,
one of my Marines. But yeah, I had 5 other corpsmen with me, but we were so separated with our rotations, and they were with their own platoons. So yeah,
that would have been helpful to have some support like that, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, I mean, we're a bunch of lost boys in Neverland, you know. So we're all misfits. So.
And Mike, I know earlier during the show you had mentioned that one of the things that really concerned you is how medics and corpsmen were depicted in movies and in TV shows in regards to, and maybe specifically Vietnam veterans, and how things like shell shock and combat fatigue were portrayed as making these individuals weak. And we're talking about moral injury and how it affects medic and corpsmen. That's a very real thing. But what are your reflections on that, Mike?
Well, you know, in the 70s, shortly after, you know, I returned from Vietnam, Vietnam veterans in general, not specific medics, but Vietnam veterans in general, were considered to be dangerous people and damaged goods and more likely to be criminal and somebody to be watched out for and guarded against. And that whole image is something that I'm repulsed by. I mean, I always felt awful whenever I'd see a news report and a criminal is referred to as a veteran rather than as a criminal. But another thing that I always like to have people know is that in Vietnam, we treated enemy wounded as well as our own wounded. And that's not something that anybody ever got credit for. I mean, it seems to me anyway. So I like the public to hear that and want them to know that a lot of effort went out on the part of Americans to help save the lives of the people they just shot. So it was there. We put them on a helicopter, off they went. So
says a lot about your character. Says a lot about your
exactly
your moral compass, in the sense that you'll also take care of our wounded enemies.
Exactly, and these 19-year-old veterans that are being badmouthed and disparaged were high school students the year before. Okay, so anyway, they're still Americans. They're still good people, and they acted that way. I was proud of everybody that I worked with.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to hear this perspective on topics like moral injury and the perception of our society of service members and medics and corpsmen. We actually have Ben, who is watching the show tonight, and he has actually called in to our studio with a question or comment. So we're gonna try to include Ben in the conversation here. Ben, are you joining us tonight?
Yeah, I'm right here, all present and accounted for.
All right, Ben, you have a question, comment? Join in.
Yeah, I don't want to take up too much time because it's like a three-part. Like I was trying to explain on the phone, it's kind of a little three-way here. So I noticed the first thing is that I'm gonna butcher this last name, Doc Lamunyon. I can't.
Yeah, Guy Lamunyon. Doc Lamunyon.
Nice. Okay. Doc Kitzman and Doc Kane, they all had like different experiences in the military, but yet 3 out of the 5 panelists have gone into mental health. Basically, after their careers in the military were done, do you guys think that's like a outgrowth of like the maternalistic nature of docs? Because you guys were talking about the role of docs changing, and I think it's a necessity of integration, meaning docs have to adapt. Like you guys get weapons all of a sudden, or you guys have to become like a mother or father figure depending on the climate or the nature of the combat. You guys think that's like an outgrowth of that? You guys went into mental health, and especially because
this is Guy. I'd like to talk to that because in addition, I'm kind of representing an organization of combat medical personnel, and there is a wide variety of post-military things that medics have done. They might go to a physician's assistant school. They might go to nursing school. They might go get a job in construction. They might work in a family business. My particular bias is mental health. So I'm going to say yes, but that's my bias.
Right. Fun fact, I know you guys probably know this, but the PA position was created for Navy corpsmen after World War II. But actually, I wanted to touch on something you said. Doc Kitzman before said like you kind of learn on the job, and I believe when he meant on the job, like when you're basically in it, and you learn that the person's not going to make it, and that can kind of turn you, stone cold sometimes, kind of numb to stuff. How does that conflict with going into mental health afterwards? Like, is that, you know what I mean? It's kind of like if you don't, I'm kind of confused on like the caring but not caring. It would be torture to me. I don't know how you guys handle it. Actually, that's probably my question. How do you guys handle it?
Personally, I felt like there was no better field for me to pursue afterwards. My Navy career was very hands-on. And when I say that I had more of an informal mental health role at the brig, it was not like anyone told me to do that or even prepared me for having to sit down and have true sessions with the inmates. And I'm talking people that have serious mental health diagnoses that are just kind of lost in the system. And I found that there's just a really natural place for me to be, is just sit there and listen to these people that have never had a chance to be heard before. And there are so many issues within the mental health side for active duty, and obviously as well once we get out. And I really felt that once I separated that there was no better place for me to go. So, and then on touch of the caring but not caring, on a personal basis, I'm fortunate that I didn't have an experience that turned me the opposite direction and made me cold, because I do know a lot of people that it had that effect. Trauma has a way of doing that. And I'm just glad that I can take my experiences and continue to push out as much positive as I can.
That's really interesting, because I know General Mattis, he always kind of harped on the fact that, like, it's not always post-traumatic stress, it can be post-traumatic growth. So I think that's really cool that you got to experience it. And then I just want to touch on one more thing. I swear I'm done with what Doc Weber with Doc Weber said. I'm in law school, just a little background, and I just wrote a paper on this. Actually, a lot of studies imply that the way disabled veterans or just any veterans are currently framed in the media, when you were talking about like the damaged goods, it's been, obviously perpetuated since Vietnam, and like the, crazy volatile Rambo is pretty prevalent in society. That actually affects veterans in hiring, getting health care, because the majority of discrimination against disabled veterans, especially in the hiring process, is due to employers having stereotypes of PTSD that are just like completely wrong. Now, there are actual issues with that, but like they're just, it's like, I think part of it's actually veterans' fault, and I can say that because I am Marine. So it's like we kind of seclude ourselves into our own little group afterwards. And it's like kind of almost like an us versus them with civilians sometimes, I believe. And I think that can harm us too, because it's like we don't bridge the gap, so to speak. I just wanted to touch on that, Mike. I thought you brought up a great point. So, all right, that was my questions.
Thank you all. Thank you, Ben, so much for watching and tuning in and for your perspective. It's really great to have our audience's interaction. We're going to get to more of that in our next segment. When we return, we will conclude our conversation with our panel and answer all of our viewers' questions. First, let's hear from the Secretary of California Department of Veterans Affairs, Dr. Vito Imbasciani. I'm joined today by Secretary of California Department of Veterans Affairs, Dr. Vito Imbasciani. Dr. Vito, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, Nathan. Great to be here.
So you served as a doctor in the military. Give us a brief history of your military service.
Well, I come from a very military family. I was born at West Point. I worked there during summers in high school and college. I wound up being a resident in surgery and urology at Yale and training partly at the West Haven VA hospital. And I took a presidential commission as an intern in 1986 while I was at Yale. That meant the Army never paid for a single day of my education, and I promised to serve at least 7 years. Well, that promise grew into a 27-year commitment, multiple deployments on active duty, the rest of the time as a reservist, or since 9/11, 10 years as the state surgeon of the California Army National Guard.
Well, what a remarkable career, and I can tell that you have been directly involved in saving lives, not only on the battlefield, but helping our service members transition home successfully. Now, you've shared a really remarkable story before that I've heard, but I'd like our audience to hear it.
I was sent to a wonderful hospital in Saudi Arabia, south of Kuwait by a few miles, so very close to the action. It was King Abdul Aziz Hospital, located on what we would call the Air Force Academy of the Saudi military. And because I was a young captain, and everyone else, all the other doctors and nurses were full bird colonels who had served in Vietnam, well, they took the day shift, and at night, I was the only doctor in this gigantic 400-bed hospital, along with 4 Army medics. And we were watching television when the alert came out at 9 o'clock on the night of February 26, 1991, that the Scud missiles had been launched from Kuwait and were coming right at our air base. So, of course, me and the 4 Army medics go downstairs, put our gas mask on. A few minutes later, we feel the ground shake. We didn't know whether it was the Patriot missiles or the Scud missiles, but after the all clear, we come up, and it turned out that 2 2 Scud missiles were shot out of the sky by our Patriot missiles, but one of them unfortunately fell out of the sky, came down, pierced the roof of a building that housed an entire unit of Pennsylvania reservists who had only arrived in theater that very day. A few minutes later, Saudi ambulances started arriving because that blast site was a mile away, and ambulance after ambulance started arriving, and the first to come into the emergency room were these soldiers completely covered in black dust and smoke. You've all seen those Keystone Cop movies or Three Stooges movies where the pie explodes in somebody's face and they get all black. I had to dust off the soot on the uniform, and I saw the subdued American flag, and I realized that these casualties, and they were definitely deceased, they were American soldiers. And I went, holy Moses. I personally pronounced dead 1/5 of all the American casualties of an entire war in the space of 90 minutes on that February 26th night.
That must have been very difficult to be such a young doctor and handle such a incredibly traumatic event, trying to save as many lives as possible. I honor you for that service. In addition to the challenges you faced in combat, from what I understand, doctors face other unique challenges as well in their service in the military.
I had to be more than a doctor. I had to stop the bleeding and call in the helicopters. That was my job description. But for example, on my forward operating base, we had 200 Army MPs and 800 Marines. And I had this one guy who went out for 5 days in a row in a tracked vehicle, it was destroyed by an IED each time, so 5 days in a row. And he came into sick bay, and he'd have that haunted look in his eye that we all know so well. And the question, you're like, hey, doc, why am I still alive? I mean, how many times do I have to, it's like Russian roulette, they feel. How many times do I have to do that before my luck runs out? And, I'm a surgeon. I fix things with a scalpel and stitches, but that guy got a hug, a long hug, and that's what he needed.
Well, Dr. Vito, thank you so much for your time today. I continue to be very inspired and honored to be in your presence and learn about your military service. And I thank you, sir, for your time as a doctor in the military and for the lives that you saved. So thank you.
Thank you, Nathan, and thanks for all you do for the veterans in your home county and for all the veterans in California. Thanks.
My honor. We'll be right back. Wow, that was always happy to talk with Dr. Vito, a friend of our show. This was just a small part of the conversation, but you can see this full interview on our Veterans Voices Facebook page. Right now, we're looking at a picture, a very special picture of one of our associate producers. This is the father of Noga Wellner, and her father served as a corpsman, believe as a part of the war in the 1980s. So we're honored to have the opportunity to show that photo and honor her father's service. And we have other pictures that we're going to show of all of our guests tonight. We're talking with corpsmen and medics. It's been a phenomenal conversation we've had, a lot of questions and comments in Facebook. We even had a caller tonight. One comment in Facebook from one of our audience members was, wow, you mean there's others out there just like me? And so this is a great opportunity to participate in this conversation and be able to relate to some of our corpsmen and medics. And we want you to contact us now with your questions or comments. Call us at 925-313-1170. Send us a message through Facebook at Veterans Voices 1 or email us veteransvoices@ContraCostaTV.org. We have our guests back tonight, and our audience, I think, has been provided an overview and somewhat more of an in-depth understanding of what the experiences are that our medic and corpsmen go through. I'd like to know maybe a little bit more about what the pathway has been like for those of you after you served in the military, and maybe some of how your skills have translated into some of the jobs that you're doing now. Kristen, I know that you continue to work as a nurse. So how has your service as a corpsman led to where you're at today?
I think the best thing I can say about my service as a corpsman was that it really instilled confidence. It gave me the ability to make a decision, an important decision, very, very quickly. I think the training, I mean, honestly, I don't know anybody besides people that have actually walked this walk with us that have had such good training. A lot of it just flying by the seat of your pants, but you learn a lot that way.
So I'd like to answer that one too.
Please.
I was amazed, I was marveled that with 10 weeks of training at Fort Sam Houston, Texas, I was able to save people's lives. So I can't say enough about the training, the preparation that the military gave me. And additionally, the subtitle for the book I'm writing is Everything I Needed to Know I Learned at Fort Sam Houston, which is where Army medics are trained. There's a couple pictures of me. One with the kids.
Others' perspectives.
Yeah, I'd also love to, like you said, that transition of skills, especially outside. Like I know Crystal and I are both going into the psychological field. I myself am in graduate school for clinical and mental health counseling, and we kind of touched on it earlier, just that, that paternal instinct. I was 19 years old getting approached by, guys in their 30s, late 20s, asking for marital advice. And I myself, I'm sitting there going like, well, what am I supposed to say to that? And doing my best, off the, like Kristen said, off the seat of my pants. I was also fortunate when I came out, we have a huge veteran program at UW Eau Claire. And I had other corpsmen with me that were going on their own routes, both PA and nursing, and having that, ability to use that. And it's definitely, I had that benefit of having a path laid out for me. I know a lot of my Marines, especially the infantry guys, don't have that capability because the skills they have aren't as transitional into the civilian world. So I think that we also have that benefit.
I found myself very fortunate. Oh, sorry, Nathan.
No, go ahead, Crystal.
I found myself very fortunate with getting a position with the education office at the University of Montana shortly after I separated. I felt like that really helped me be right back in with a very small group of people that had also all served, and just a nice kind of soundboard to come in and share our experiences in between our daily work duties. And I honestly believe that if I didn't have that as like my mini support group, it would have made the transition a lot more difficult. So I am a huge advocate for those support groups in whatever form that they take.
Now, Mike, I know that you have continued in a very large role within the community of caring for veterans who are homeless. To what extent do you think your role as a medic serving in Vietnam led to your drive to remain involved in your community and caring for those who are wounded in several different ways?
I always felt blessed to have the job that I had, where I was helping people, and the feeling that you get when you make a difference to somebody, you want to feel that some more, and the more people you can help, but the thing is, Winston Churchill that said, you make a living by what you earn, but you make a life by what you give back. And that's always been true for me. And Nathan referred to Stand Down, which is a homeless veterans event. And I think I did my first stand down when I was in Vietnam still. We had a Martha Ray USO show that came to play coup. And we took patients out of the 71st Evac Hospital and took them to that show. And on the way to the show, a lot of these young men, I mean, they're 19 years old, and I was too. And they were dejected, and they'd seen their friends killed, and they were in a frame of mind that said, take me too. I shouldn't have survived that. Just take me too. I don't want to live. And they were just really down and down and down. And we took them to this USO show with Martha Ray, and she had Dallas Cowgirl cheerleaders and all this other stuff going on the stage. And they got a glimpse of their former life. And the young men we brought back from that USO show were different than the young men we took over to the show. They again had a zest for life. They wanted to live, and it just was a little bit of a light bulb that came on for them. And I volunteered to do that transportation issue with our ambulance crews and whatnot, just because I wanted a front row seat to the TNA show. Okay, but I was rewarded way more by the feeling that I got from helping these young men, because it was life altering. Because I took a young man who this afternoon was ready to die and willing to die, and this after this show he's looking forward to living, and it was magic. And I've always felt rewarded by that. And if I can do more, like helping these homeless veterans and whatnot, and stand down, it's the same type scenario. You just want to matter, want to make a difference to people, and matter.
That gives me such good understanding and perspective of why you are so passionately involved in stand downs, Mike, and I thank you for that work. Kristen, we have about 3 minutes left. Someone who wants to become a corpsman or a medic, what would you advise them? How should they prepare? What would make them successful, just as all of you have been in that role?
Boy, that's a great question. I think you just have to really be able to calm yourself. There's a lot of instances where you really kind of have to check in with yourself before you can proceed. I don't know if there's a certain subset of skills that make you more apt than another person. But I mean, just really pay attention to what you're doing, check in with yourself before you move ahead.
Thank you for that. And I want to fit in one last question. And Killy, I see that you answered it in the chat, but could you answer for our audience? Looking back, would you trade your experience as a corpsman for any other position in the military?
Yeah, like I said, I love being a doc. I love the fact that I'll forever have that title as a doc, just as like everyone else here on the panel. But I served my last year with EOD, and I'm telling you, those guys are a special breed, and that kind of community made me definitely wonder, like, should I go back and try either going Navy EOD or Marine EOD? And then for those who don't know, EOD is explosive ordnance disposal. So, the bomb guys. Yeah. So I definitely had a little itch there, and that was because I had such a good group of dudes.
Well, thank you, all of you. I certainly can't say that my service was anything comparable to those of corpsmen, medics, and doctors. So on behalf of all of us who benefited from the care and the treatment that you provided in the many different ways, I do thank all of our corpsmen and medics and doctors and nurses for their service in the military. This concludes our phenomenal conversation with our panel. A little later, we will have a list of resources for organizations you have seen in the show. But now it's time to hear a veteran's voice. This month, Stephen Burchick talks with veteran Patrick Leary. Enjoy.
I'm Steve Burchick, and our segment today is A Veteran's Voice. Our guest is Patrick Leary. Welcome, Patrick.
Steve, thank you for having me today.
Glad to have you. Can you briefly describe your military experience?
I enlisted in the Army in 1966 and was fortunate to get a slot in flight school. So I became an Army aviator. Flew for a year in Vietnam, flew helicopter gunships, and then spent 2 years over in Germany and flew VIP units. So I got to travel Germany quite a bit in style. So.
Sounds pretty interesting.
It was.
What was one of your more interesting flights, either in Vietnam or in Germany?
I believe it was 1970. I was flying General Rogers and his staff. We were doing a tour of Belgium, going to NATO and NATO headquarters. And General Rogers got in a helicopter and he said, I want to take a tour of Belgium and I want to go see Waterloo. And I said, General, Waterloo's not on our flight plan and I have no idea where it is. And General Rogers said, son, take off, look for a hill, that's Waterloo. So we took off, found the hill, and we toured Waterloo.
Oh, is that the only hill in Belgium?
That's the only hill in Belgium.
Okay. Patrick, tell us about your civilian education or professional training.
I got out of the Army, went to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Daytona Beach, Florida. Got an undergraduate degree in airport management with a minor in applied math. Went to work for an insurance company using the minor in math skill, if you will. In that time, I went to Trujillo University, got an MBA in quantitative analysis and finance, and leveraged those skills. Then computers were a relatively new introduction to business. Was able to leverage those skills into using computers to make schedules, to make logistic plans, and so forth for several other companies besides the insurance company.
I also understand you spent some time in the confectionary industry. Can you describe what you did there?
It was a great part of my career. I worked for Russell Stover. Throughout my career, I started my career, big career with Kenner Toys, and we did a lot of work over in Asia at that time, sourcing toys and packaging in Asia. Ended my career with Russell Stover, again working in Asia. All of Russell Stover's candy is in fact made in the U.S., but the packaging, particularly for seasonal products, the Christmas, Easter, Valentine's Day, is made in Asia. So that was my responsibility to get the product made, to get it shipped over here.
Can you discuss your involvement with veteran service organizations?
Looking for something to do. And I was very fortunate to stumble into a number of veterans and found a really rich community of some really good guys that are, I think the phrase is, we're still citizen soldiers and we're still serving.
How did you get started with the Vinson Orphan?
In 1968, I was stationed in Pleiku. We had a company commander who I dearly appreciate, a guy named Bill Fraker, since passed away, who was adamant that on our off days that we would get to know the people that we're actually working and fighting for, the Vietnamese citizens. So he encouraged us strongly, as only a major can, to participate, to help an orphanage that was right outside the gates of Camp Holloway, orphanage called Tutam. So we go literally play with the kids. We teach them baseball, teach them football. We brought food supplies when we could. We brought building supplies when we could. We helped them construct buildings when we could. So we did that in 1968. It kind of became part of my Vietnam memories, if you will. One of my trips to Vietnam, to Asia, when I was working for Russell Stover, was to Vietnam to see if we could figure out some sourcing issues and source some product from Vietnam. I took time off on that trip to go back up to Pleiku to see if what I could see. And I, in fact, found Tutam. And I, in fact, found Sister Keat, who was Sister Keat back in 1968, and much younger. But she was there and still there. So that kind of hit home. I had another tour guide who took me up to Kontum, and there was a much larger orphanage organization up in Kontum called Vinson. And on the wall of one of the buildings was a plaque with Mike Little's name on it and his phone number and email address. So when I got back to Kansas City, I called Mike, introduced myself, and told him how impressed I was with some of the work and buildings that I had seen there. When I retired, I was fortunate to move to California. California is where the headquarters is, if you will, of the Vinson Orphanage, Friends of Vinson. Got involved in their board meetings and got reeled in real quick.
Why are there still so many orphans this many years after the Vietnam War?
Good question. We work in the area called the Central Highlands. That's the home country, if you will, of a group of ethnic people called Mountainards. Okay. Mountainards are ethnically distinct from Vietnamese. They're not the same culture, not the same DNA, if you will. They are in the highlands of Vietnam, which is a rural area to begin with. And in Vietnam itself, it's still a third world country. Particularly prenatal services. A lot of these kids come from small villages. There are no doctors. There are seldom even a shaman to help them through things. So the birthing process is moderately difficult. You know, it's I don't want to say the word primitive, but it's old-fashioned at best. So what tends to happen is either, you know, when mom dies, dad can't take care of the child because dad has to go out and work and do some kind of work, or dad dies and mom is responsible, or they have 3 or 4 or 5 children, and although there is a mom and dad, they just can't afford 3 or 4 or 5 children, so they drop them off at the orphanage. So there's a whole host of reasons why kids wind up at the orphanage, primarily due because of the poverty level.
So the bottom line is there's not much of a safety net there.
There is no safety net there, right.
Do you have any advice for veterans on the value of volunteering with a veterans group or a charitable organization?
Yeah, I do. Like I said before, when I joined the veterans group, I found people who had grown up with me. They shared the same experience I did when I was 21, 22 years old. And those value systems have stayed with me and have stayed with the guys who have joined the veterans groups as well. There are all kinds of activities that you can do that runs the gamut of supporting your community.
Well, Patrick, thank you for joining us today. It's been a real privilege chatting with you.
Hey, it's been my honor. Thank you very much, Steve. I appreciate it.
We hope you have enjoyed our conversation with corpsmen and medics. Here are some resources to connect you with some organizations featured in the show. The National Association of Military Medics and Corpsmen provides a continued mission for those who served. Contact them at nammc.org. The Vinson Orphanage gives a helping hand to those who need it most. Find them at friendsofvso.org. Veterans Voices is brought to you in part by contributions from the Diablo Valley Veterans Foundation, dedicated to helping veterans near you. American Legion Post 246, honoring the tradition of the American Legion in Danville. If you would like to help sponsor Veterans Voices, you can donate to Veterans Voices, care of Diablo Valley Veterans Foundation. Get in touch with them at diabloveterans.org. To rewatch tonight's episode, check back on our homepage later this week or check your cable provider's schedule for rebroadcast times. You can also rewatch this episode and many others on our YouTube channel, Veterans Voices of Contra Costa, so be sure to subscribe. Our next show will air on Monday, September 12th at 7 p.m. We will be talking with chaplains. You won't want to miss it. To all of our veterans and their families, thank you for serving. To all of you who tuned in tonight, thanks for watching and have a great evening.